Good afternoon, fellow citizens. Welcome to the Citizens Chat Show. This is the 17th episode. It's on the 1st of July, 2021. This segment of our conversation is on Zoom, and we're trying to, as much, maintain social distancing following the SOPs and having a conversation not physical as it has always been. We're trying to make sure that at least we have these conversations going regardless. So while out there, kindly observe your SOPs, follow the guidelines that the Ministry of Health has prescribed for us to make sure that at least we can move out of this situation. Thank you very much for being with us. And today we are discussing whether government is on track in handling the second wave of COVID-19. And joined on the panel is one, I will need to start with my guest, who is Dr. Safari. Dr. Safari is also a doctor at it's called Nyachibare Hospital, but also a member of the Taskforce, District Taskforce in Rukungiri. Dr. Safari, you're welcome, sir. Thank you very much. Yes. Then followed is I'll need to use how the screen is presenting is Joseph Ochieno. Yeah, Joseph Ochieno is also a leadership contender in the UPC party, and our regular panelist. Joseph, you're welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me, Damien, and good afternoon, fellow citizens.
Yes, and finally is Sarah Bireete, lawyer, and also the executive director with the Center for Constitutional Governance. Sarah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Demian, and good afternoon, viewers.
Yeah, thank you. On the panel, we are missing two people. One is Dr. Rugyendo, who has just got an emergency, being that he's on work. So we request that he will join in possibly later. But also, Arinitwe Rugyendo will maybe also join us in the way as we progress. So I just need to bring us into the discussion. A few statistics just to share the most current statistics into the second wave. On 29th June 2021, the ministry recorded 1,057 cases with an accumulation of 81,000 cases. Then we had active cases of up to 1,057. Recoveries we at 579, and the death at 38. So the cumulative death is 1,061, and the cumulative recoveries is 53,233. And this is the second wave. And into our discussion, I would want to start off with a person who is directly first on the task force, but also in the medical field, Dr. Arnold Safari. I want to bring you into the discussion. And first to begin, what is your take on how the government is handling the management of the pandemic so far?
Yes, thank you very much. I will bring out 2 points partaking how the government has attempted to deal with the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm going to look at one which I will maybe call it administrative, and then I'll look at the medical aspects of the management. On the administrative aspect of managing this COVID-19, I think the only point that I can give credit to this government for having tried maybe to, for having attempted to make good strides. One of them was re-establishing or putting a lockdown into place, which in some way has helped in minimizing on movements from one district to the other, but also minimizing on people moving unnecessarily and beyond curfew hours, which to some extent I think has helped to minimize the spread of the disease. Previously, much as we were saying that bars were closed, like the president would keep saying in his addresses that bars remain closed, I think it was in his mind that bars were closed. But elsewhere, I think bars never closed, actually. Recently, I saw in Daily Monitor, they released a list of bars and clubs in various districts and cities of Uganda, showing those that never closed, actually. And this was a picture everywhere. They could have closed those that are maybe near the main roads, or those that do not have connections to the would-be in this government, like we all know. But
Doctor, are you trying
surely,
to suggest that the bars are the reason we are into the second wave?
partly, and I think it is a big contributor, because I attempted one time, I think that is when I went to Gulu, and really everywhere people were moving out. They were moving out to these open bars. There is one near, I think it is in the bus terminal. There are very many. And you could see crowds of people who actually we are not minding about the SOPs, no masks, and sure, you can be sure. I think this is partly one of the reasons why we have the second wave. Maybe also, I can also attribute it to the transport means. Whereas we are saying that in a taxi there should be a limited number of travelers, and also in the buses. I think this worked for the first like 2 to 3 weeks after easing of the measures, and after that everything went back to normal. Maybe somebody would load to full capacity and knows when I approach a traffic officer, some will have to get out, borders, and bypass the traffic, and then they enter the taxis again. And this has been going on up to now, when they again imposed another lockdown. Similarly, when you look at the places of worship, we had gone back to the previous normal, and people are full in church. Very few put on masks. Actually, when you put on a mask, you look out of place. And maybe I can also attribute that to the laxity, maybe in the population, but also in failure by government to really implement its measures like it had put in place. The restrictions were later ignored and not followed as it was supposed to be. So partly, I think, much as the government blames the citizens that they shouted so much and said it was politics, that is just a blame game. At the end of the day, we realize that actually government takes the whole blame for what we are having right now. You realize also, for people who are traveling from outside countries, or those who are traveling abroad, most people would actually forge these results either for PCR. They would forge these results so that they can travel. And that's why we have seen on several occasions somebody tests negative here, and when they reach their next destination, they get a positive PCR result. So now you wonder, should we say our machine that does PCR is faulty, or actually these are forged results? And in most cases, they are forged results. Like, definitely for somebody who has lived in Uganda, there's nothing that cannot be forged at the end of the day. So that is basically on the administrative aspect. I think the measures were later not followed as it had been stipulated, because the security also later engaged into bribery. I think bribery basically was one of the biggest points, because you see, in most cases, you would go to a place, a policeman comes and invades it, and if they do and give this person some money, then that place works for some time, until when he feels like they should add them some more money. In town, I would be driving around town in the evening from work, and you see policemen, they look at a certain class of people. They see somebody they cannot arrest, like Ochieno. They see somebody, they know this one, if we get, he can give us 50,000. So they get the person, put on a police van. They know this person will maybe in some way or the other get the 50,000 and pay, and is left to go. Border was the same thing. So basically, they took it as a money-making venture instead of actually a prevention measure. And this partly has contributed to the second wave. On the second point of in line with health, I think still we have not managed the pandemic the way it should have been, given the lessons learned from the first wave. For instance, we saw supplementary budget is being made, and these were meant to buy, I think, beds, to buy ICU machines, the ventilators, to buy PPE, and to reinforce the forces on the ground, the health workers, so that we can be set in case of another wave. However, today I think we have heard, the other day there was a report about the people who had contracted to buy the oxygen cylinders and all that, given out, I think 6 billion and beyond, and nothing has been delivered to date. So basically, you can see that as government, I think we usually they usually more on the side of they bring suggestions, but we do not implement at the end of the day. That's why you find we have not improved even the capacity of our national or regional referral hospitals across Uganda. Still, they are the same level they were in the first wave. What we call ICUs actually are just the high dependence units that have just added a bed or two. And these, in case of severe cases, still need to go to ICU, and we do not have the capacity to run them. Today, I was looking at our data for the Association of Anesthesiologists in Uganda, and actually I noted that when you look around Kampala, and actually most of the ICUs we have that are operational are around Kampala, and majority are around 4 or 5 beds, and you don't see any place that can run over 100 beds in ICU. Not even Mulago can. If they call it an ICU, then we are misled. In that case, we would rather call it a high dependence unit. Also, the labor force, as of yesterday, the last time I tried to check on the Anesthesiologist Association of Uganda, you realize that in general, in total, as Uganda, we have less than 150 practicing anesthesiologists. Out of the less than 150, we have over 50 who are actually involved in university teaching. That is Mbarara, Makerere, Guru, and maybe now Kabare and Bale universities, where there is medicine being taught. So you realize, and these are also already. So the few that are left are also in private practice, and the others have actually flown out of the country for greener pastures elsewhere. So we have still not built enough capacity. Even if we had the money to buy those beds, or even if they were available enough ICUs, we would still not have the manpower to run them, because one anesthesiologist cannot run an ICU on a day-to-day basis, doing maybe, if we call it 24 hours or even 36, like it happens in some cases. So still we have not improved on the workforce. We have still kept the status quo. Most of the people who are in private stayed in the private. A few who were hired to help out in government hospitals, after not being paid for some time, some have chosen to again resort to their private practice, and therefore we are in this second wave, we are caught unaware. That's why when you check, for example, Mbarara Regional Referral Hospital, or if I'm to use an example of Kabale Regional Referral Hospital, which may not have a very strong medical school, I think they're just starting, you realize that Kabale does not have, actually it has one anesthesiologist with a few anesthetists. Maybe throw more light on who an anesthesiologist is. It is this person who has done his bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery, and goes for a master's degree in anesthesia and critical care. Then an anesthetist, who are the majority in our health center and some hospitals and maybe the private health facilities. These have just had a diploma in anesthesia, so they may not be able to carry out very invasive procedures that are actually necessary in ICU, or if they can, they may not be able to manage these patients, because like here, the higher you advance, then the more specialized that you become. So currently the labor force is still lacking. I think you see we usually tend to react when we get problems. I saw the other day there was an advert calling for more volunteers from Lago, I think medical officers, because they know they do not have enough labor force. And besides, even those who were hired in the first wave were not paid. They are not fully paid, and definitely, so I don't think it will get the momentum that it had previously, where people were all rushing to apply to volunteer because they knew it would come at a certain level of remuneration. Now they know you might even volunteer for some time, you risk your life, and at the end of it all, you're actually not paid. So as a government, I think really they have failed in aspects of health, and they have really failed, because what we are doing basically is what should be done ideally, even outside the pandemics. This is what we should be doing. So we are just doing it in a pandemic, but still we are not doing it to its best.
Thank you very much, Daktari. And that is, you've taken us a very long journey into how you handle this. I think I need to bring on Joseph around this point. What is your take on a possibility of how government is handling the management of the second from today? You need to unmute.
Yes. Is that okay now?
Yes.
Yes, because I had a bit of noise in the background, so I'm sorry. So I had to get it muted, yes. So I'm saying, I think it's extremely worrying hearing from the doctor the state of the situation at the moment. I can tell you that most of the experiences I'm having right now in Nagongera is that I'm not quite sure whether people trust the health facilities. I'm not sure whether people know what to do. And indeed, as we're having an informal conversation before coming on air, whether or not somebody who's showing symptoms of malaria will comfortably want to go and present themselves at the health facilities, because actually they don't really know what the outcomes are. Now, much as some of us who are normally critical observers might quickly go on to and make loose conclusions, it's interesting that these observations that are coming from somebody who is practicing on a day-to-day basis. I think I totally agree that there was an element of complacency by the population when it came particularly around maybe returning maybe to churches. In terms of the bars, because I'm possibly a distant person, I didn't know that these things were as bad, but I overheard them. That and them and you and I know that even around some of the facilities where some of us would possibly operate, by evening times, if you want your beers, it was not going to be a difficult thing. And so there was a huge amount of complacency there. My problem, though, is beyond what the public were doing and beyond who was then to be held responsible leading us to the second wave as it is how we manage the process now going forward. Now, one is the manner in which, in my opinion, the students were unleashed from schools. I will keep repeating that because I think that was very particular. It has still reverberating effects upcountry. My experiences in Tororo and some of the other places is that many of the people who died, including somebody who's being buried today, it's known that they contracted this from family members, and family members associated with people who came either away from Kampala or came out of schools around particular areas, number one. Number two, the questions around public transport. It is obviously true that public transport, you could see that there's elements of complacency. And it's obviously a shame that we were not able to enforce as a government, and indeed particularly security services. But again, my other shocker is this, that for people who volunteered, as very well presented, risking their lives, not to be paid considering the amount of money that has been, or was focused and targeted and earmarked for COVID is a shame. So how much this program, and many other people are able to highlight these things and turn this into a campaign. And it would be interesting hearing from Sarah's own views on how we're able to turn around these things and put government to task to ensure that existing staff, meaning public sector staff, get the pay, get the enumeration, get the protection, and get the guarantee in terms of the services that they provide at these critical times. Get not only their back payment, but indeed get their pay is extremely important. For the moment, though, I think that everybody is rather worried that we don't know which way it's going to go. But I just hope that it couldn't be any better time to rally around than this time.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Those are nice dimensions that you bring in that we shall need to expound on. Sarah, you lately you've tried to take up the title of Mutua 1C. You speak as Mutua 1C. So I want to bring you close here. Doctor says that some of these, and especially the second wave, is upon us because of the lifestyle change that we adopted just after the first wave, that not actually follow the SOPs. I want to go into the bars and the lifestyle of around the citizens. Do you think this is entirely about us as citizens, or government has a role to play in mismanagement of the first and to the second wave?
Yeah,
as umuntu wawansi.
Yeah, I think it is both ways, to be fair. As a country, we dropped the ball. Abandoned the standard operating procedures for prevention of COVID. The public started mixing as if the World Health Organization had declared the world COVID-free. There were crowds at burials, there were weddings, we had a swearing-in ceremony of about 5,000 people. So everybody dropped the ball. Government went careless, even in terms of health preparedness of a pandemic. The political management, it's as if the serious show in the first phase was meant to gain confidence and capture votes. And that is building into the mismanagement or carelessness we are seeing today. In the first phase, government was more serious on the pandemic. And on the health aspect, they scored up to 80%. What messed up the first phase was the abuses, excesses, and bias of security forces in extreme violations of human rights, especially those of the opposition members, before the campaigns and throughout the campaign and even after campaigns. But the health teams were up to the task of controlling the pandemic. They even had capacity, press, contacts, test, quarantine everybody. And that's how we managed to get out of the first phase with less casualties in terms of medical fatality for COVID. But we had, because of the security gap, World Bank has released a report that for every adult death we saved, we lost 4 infants because of the pregnant women whose access to health was disrupted by security. But how are we doing today? We have a crisis at the level of testing. We have a crisis at the level of treatment, as Dr. Safari has elaborated. We have a crisis at the level of relief for the vulnerable after declaration of lockdown. We have a crisis at the level of communication as government and coordinated communication. We have a crisis of accountability, transparency, and confidence. And now we have stealing of vaccines and fake vaccines on the market. So that is how far we have moved. And I don't know whether the leadership of President Museveni that has paid lip service to the fight against corruption, which they use for persecution of people holding dissenting views. I don't know whether he can turn the tide around. The accountability for COVID, the transparency required, the governance as the country slips into a public debt crisis. We know that the quick facility for COVID under IMF has approved 3.5 trillion shillings. But do we have capacity to administer this fund as a country to the benefit of the citizens? Do we have that kind of leadership? So Demian, this is the crisis where we are. We have a crisis of exorbitant medical bills from private caregivers. We have a crisis of absence of essential drugs for COVID. We have lack of oxygen, even in National Referral Hospital in Murago. We have unpaid allowances for frontline health workers. So that's where we are. We are really shabby. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Doctor, you realize the huge concerns here from Mutuawansi. So I want you to come on. Is this situation this bad? You're in the task force of the district, Rukungiri. Is the situation as this bad? Of course, you hinted on the fact that of course, there's recruitment that is ongoing, but you suspect there will not be that excitement in joining the cause. Is it true that you're not as much facilitated as a task force to ensure that there is a good way of handling this pandemic?
Thank you very much. I think I will start by saying that actually, even on this task force, I'm there as a volunteer, and I do not.
That is extraordinary, if true.
I do not earn anything being on the Rukungiri district task force, whereas maybe people in government could be benefiting. I've been there ever since COVID, that is around March last year. Up to date, I have never, as an individual, gotten anything in form of remuneration or support, but we have kept going. But over here, previously, like we said, there was some anticipation that maybe the situation would go worse. And I think for some time, government tried to do everything possible. But later, I think after getting a few clues about the disease, and given that Africa was not badly hit previously, I think they tended, there was a tendency to, they looked at it as any other disease. And actually, this has contributed to the reason why we are being hit bad. Today, really, the situation is as bad as Sarah has really clearly brought it out. Because when you look at Rukungiri as a district, for instance, we do not have the mandate to manage COVID-19 cases. Maybe those who are under home-based care. For those that may not may be having moderate disease and may not need ICU, we still refer to Kabale or Mbarara, but this is also after inquiring to be sure that there is space. Now, even the people, yesterday actually, I had one of the biggest challenges when I tried to explain to a patient, because I wanted to refer them, but the patient instead said they would rather go and die from home than going to Kabale, because given that they already have other people there who come from the same place or actually in the same region with them, and they have communicated and they tell them, look here, we are crowded in a big hall with attendants, nobody's allowed to move out, we sleep on the floor, and people look at that situation and like, I would rather stay home, and maybe if I'm to die, I die from home, but not going to suffer in Kabale, and I do not know whether actually I will come back from Kabale alive. So this is the situation we are in. Previously, we had actually advocated, and I would have preferred that government takes on the same, given that we are in a lockdown, the turn-up of patients in health facilities is slightly lower. And it would have been better if we resorted and got at least one health center for instance, that can be easily accessible, and we turn it into a treatment unit. The management around COVID-19 wouldn't be that complicated. What complicates it is, like we already pointed out earlier, is the time the person presents to hospital, or the time of diagnosis that actually this is COVID-19, then the time of initiation of treatment. For people that are...
Doctor, I want to bring you back.
Yes.
Just a simple question. Why do we have shortages of essential medicine and PPEs and oxygen in the hospitals? From your perspective, you're in the hospital now. What do you think is the problem?
Okay, thank you very much. Like I already said earlier, definitely the government of Uganda has never taken health as a priority. It has never. And this has been my argument right from the first time I stepped into medical school. That's when I noticed that actually I had made the wrong choice to some extent, but to another extent, I knew it was the calling. When today, if we hear that there is a new gun or another state-of-the-art aircraft that is very good, maybe in curtailing, maybe a form of rebellion or anything that tends to pose threat to this country, it is easy to procure it, be it on a date. However, for anything to do with health or improving the health sector in Uganda, really, it has never been, and I think it will not be a priority of this government in quite a long time. The reason why I'm saying this, when you see, for example, here in Rukungiri, the biggest that a health center for can afford maybe 3 oxygen cylinders. Now, when you have a very critically ill patient, a critically ill patient can consume 1 oxygen cylinder in less than 5 hours. So that means one patient can use all the 4 cylinders that are available at health center. And I think they have not really seen how relevant such oxygen cylinders or maybe minor ICUs, what we call the HDUs, are in this country, or like I already brought about even the point of the labor force. Surprised yesterday, I was telling people, when you look at the data, you realize that we have over 1,000 unemployed doctors. And people up to today cannot believe that Uganda has such a number of doctors who are unemployed, and yet actually the hospitals are still lacking the labor force. The doctor-to-patient ratio is still very high, close to 1,000, but still we have very many doctors who are unemployed. According to the recommendations from WHO, we know what the doctor-to-patient ratio should be, but we are way below the standard that is recommended by WHO. Simply because these do not matter to this government. Maybe they will matter in the foreign governments, but for now, I think they do not matter so much, and we find it a very big challenge. At times, you have a patient at your disposal, you know what to do for the patient, but you really don't have what to do for them at that time. You do not have the drug of choice you would have preferred to use, and you are referring a patient you are sure will actually, most likely they die on the way before they reach their next maybe referral site. So it is a big challenge in that regard. But I think the biggest point is maybe that as a government, the priorities, what they say as priorities may not necessarily be what are most important for the citizens in general, but for those that really...
We shall get back there. I want to get back to Joseph. Joseph, government seems to be reacting in a knee-jerk mode at this point. Yet we see in the first wave, they seem to have been ahead of the game. What is the problem now?
No, I don't think these guys were ahead of the game at the first wave. I think possibly Obwana God just was kind enough to Africa that while the rest of the world, the whole thing was escalating, we sort of saw these things coming, number one. Number two, the disease happened to have been the disease of the traveled. So the guys who came from China, the guys who came from Europe via Entebbe, via those bigger places, got the disease fast. That is why in Africa, and Demian, you are a witness, some of our own colleagues were laughing and boasting that Uganda was doing well in comparison to Kenya, but simply because Nairobi is a much more global city than Kampala or Entebbe. South Africa, because South Africa is the most urbanized country in the world. So, rather in Africa. So it was basically purely that. So in meaning that these guys saw that actually COVID kills, and they started seeing COVID killing people. and call it COVID captured the British Prime Minister, and he nearly died. And had he been in any African country, Boris Johnson would have died. In fact, he nearly died. So these guys had the opportunity, to modify lives around themselves first, and then relative lives around citizens of this country when they realize that COVID knows no class, knows no money, and in a way, sort of the pace at which the whole thing moved helped them. In my opinion, that in part was that, but yes, of course, we shall still give them relative credit. This time around, because we were sort of got off guard and this thing was coming and it was already there anyway, the arrival was a bang inside us and within our own communities. So the knee-jerk reaction was a manifestation of how weak our systems are, But I come back to this, that actually I find Arnold's a suggestion very specifically about the specialist centers very, very entertaining. And Sarah, you and I, who gossip with many people around the country, perhaps we might throw at them this suggestion at no fee. Some of their experts might go ahead and claim ownership of this. But I think this is possibly a good idea because I don't see why not. Now, for me in Tororo, which is sort of the day before yesterday, Tororo was the third most affected district outside the metropoles of Kampala. So it's very disconcerting. And as I said, my own experiences in Nagongera, people sort of we just hope it doesn't happen to the person next to me, but we don't know. Now, if we hear from Dr. Arnold the kind of experiences that people are having, including in his hospitals in Rukungiri, what happens if something like this happens in many of the much less rural places, health facilities? Maybe when these guys realize that whatever happens, this thing will have to catch up with all of us, maybe they will wake up to it. But again, your big question is, and I think the other big question is, how could somebody be so heartless as to make sure that they eat COVID money? How could somebody be so heartless as to do it in such a manner that doctors and health workers and facilities which are there to save lives, which lives really are colorless, are lost out in peak? The first wave found me somehow in England. The manner in which today health workers are revered, these guys had to pick actually Thursdays, like yesterday, as a day for, clapping at 7 o'clock, for clapping and drumming for health workers and doctors and nurses and things like that. Now for us, we sort of take it for granted. So I don't know. It's a question of national leadership. I think it's a question of priority, as I think Arnold seems to suggest. But in many cases, possibly it's a crude way of saying it, that maybe some of these things, we want them to strike home first before we wake up to say that, to realize that these things are so bad. Moreover, the elites, the so-called middle classes amongst Ugandans, maybe initially, whether it was malaria, to an extent, little extent AIDS, but malaria particularly, and other conditions, people did not mind about the state of the health facilities because they could buy medicine. Private hospitals and private health facilities amongst the most thriving businesses in town. And then some of these guys thought also they could take their billions, usually stolen money, to take them for medical treatments abroad. But possibly the realization that actually when this thing hits, you may not even have an opportunity to jump between a particular corner of Kampala outskirts and Entebbe airport. That is, if you find a visa to take you outside the country anyway, is so limited. So sort of we're in all these things together, and all we can plead is that, look, let's open up our eyes, use facilities, and for citizens watching us, really know very well that this thing is serious. This thing will manifest themselves as if it's malaria, and then the turnout is that it may be something worse. And then just a quick one, Demian, as a matter of interest. I'm not a public health person. I have a friend who reported with basic headache and basic conditions, and they took the whole thing for granted. And then, as I think I said it in a previous program, they had a bit of temperature. They didn't even think they're in a difficult situation. I insisted that they should test. They tested themselves, found themselves positive, and thus the entire household was positive. Now, these are people who are relatively affluent, but remember, they could afford to go for some of these tests and treatment. And I want Adnan to come back to us on this, particularly this thing about the cost of testing, because that's been part of the problem. But on the other hand, is a recent example in the last few days where somebody died, actually an aunt to a cousin to a friend of mine, who had presented as getting better. They thought that they were improved, returned home, and then the situation turned around overnight, and then they died. So this is a serious situation, and as I say, it's a situation for which we need a national leadership. And Mr. Museveni, for various circumstances, followed others to provide some relative leadership on HIV/AIDS. And I really don't know why and how he cannot provide for it at this time. I know he's surrounded by sharks, including perhaps a culture that he himself created, but it's possibly not too late for them to turn this around.
Thank you very much, Joseph. And also, I see Ndugu Rugyendo, our regular panelist, has also joined us. Rugyendo, Arinitwe, welcome. Rugyendo is the ED with journalist, but also the CEO of Streamline UG.
The young man in red.
Welcome, Rugyendo.
Thank you very much. I can see Joseph. Joseph is very elated. He thinks I have joined the UPC.
Good man, welcome to Congress.
I am very sorry. I was still driving and I could not really under a stable positioning so that I can join in. I'm sorry for coming in late. I was in another meeting. Joseph, I'm not in UPC. I am just trying to be a good human.
Rugyendo, I will not give you an opportunity to rest. I want you to, because we are having an interesting conversation. There's Dr. Safari, you've missed his openness, and it was as interesting. But just to while you were driving there, we're trying to discuss the issues around how government is now acting, or reacting in a knee-jerk mode, as opposed to the first wave, where they seemed to have been in control of the game. What is the problem? I don't want you to rest. Just start shooting from there. What do you think is the problem?
No, like I mentioned last week, I think the second wave really caught government off guard to begin with, and I think also that having performed very well in the first wave gave a false sense of confidence to the government actors that COVID is defeatable. And I remember even mentioning last week that around April, the statistics will show that there were only about 6 patients in the public hospitals around the country. So there was that thinking, that belief that this disease is defeatable, and I think some of the actors really did not read the signs of the times, especially regionally. Kenya had just had a second wave, and many other countries, we were caught off guard, and so therefore that explains the knee-jerk reaction that we are seeing. As to whether the government is succeeding is a bit debatable. It's still debatable. I have seen some bit of reduction in the what they call the positivity rate.
Are you off? Rugyendo seems to be off.
Yeah.
Dr. Safari, are you there? Possibly, maybe Sarah, you could try to just see where is the problem? Why do we have this knee-jerk mode option at this point?
No, I think the problem is twofold. One is we don't have mechanisms for political transition, and the second wave hit a climax at the time when we had no government. Even the first address by the president, we had one member of the executive. So the first is our regulatory framework, which assumes that NRM will be in power forever and there is no provision for transition as we go for elections. So we have a period when government and cabinet ceases to act, and then we have a period of swearing in and formation of a new cabinet where people have to first be approved and take oath. So, and that is the time we are hit most by the virus under the second wave. So we had a vacuum in terms of political administration and preparedness in the country. But also that goes into the bigger problem of lack of systematic planning as a nation. Uganda on face value seems a prosperous country because citizens are surviving on their own using market forces in the different spheres of work that they do. So government masquerades on that to appear to be a functional government, yet they are dysfunctional. All institutions have been undermined by the permanent presidency and the challenges of governance we are facing as a country, and that has not spared the health sector. So you have a dysfunction and dilapidated health sector that cannot act on its own unless you've pumped in money from IMF and other donors to be able to save some lives. And at that time, we had no capacity to move because of the absence of our regulatory framework for transitions in between swearing in and the new government that creates a vacuum. We saw even from the time of the first COVID address under second wave and the second COVID address, cabinet has only been able to meet after the third address because there was a one-man cabinet in place. So even we did not have the national task force that was reconstituted after the swearing in of ministers. So that created a problem at that level. But away from that, we had problems that we carried forward from the first wave. The president recently asked the Minister of Health why we didn't have the 42,000 planned beds, and we have less than 10% of the envisaged beds needed to be able to save lives during this pandemic. So you plan for 42 beds, but you have about 3,500 beds. You plan for ICU and all that heavy procurement, but where it is, you start telling people that you don't have cartridges to do the tests that are needed, the rapid tests. Whatever we planned, including oxygen, is not functional. So the first phase and first lockdowns that should have prepared, that presented an opportunity for our country to plan and best save lives, especially knowing that we do not have a health sector with capacity to manage the pandemic as we are witnessing globally, was squandered. This was a God-given opportunity to Africa. The first wave was a God-given opportunity to Africa to prepare better and prevent severe sicknesses for the healthcare infrastructure that we do not have. Europe and the US that have advanced health infrastructure were brought to their knees. And God gave some light to Africa to say, prepare, you don't have capacity. Even people with capacity are overwhelmed, and we squandered that opportunity.
Sarah, but you see, there's been conspiracies around this pandemic. I think that's why you see there's been unpreparedness from our side. And for us, of course, the message that
we were all watching international TV. We all have relatives globally. The globe is connected. We are on internet. Who was not seeing what happened in Italy? Who was not seeing what happened in the US? Who was not seeing the 5,000 deaths per day in India? Who did not see? Were those conspiracies? They were not. So this was an opportunity to say, this is how the pandemic is progressing. This is how the mutation have become severe. India was a live example. Then if we had serious planning nationally here, somebody should have gone on the drawing board and say, India, which had vaccinated about 34% of their population, and were procuring and supplying vaccines to the rest of the third world countries, have been brought on their knees because of the mutation of the wave of the virus. How do we prepare? We have a lot of commonalities as people between Africans and Indians and Black Indians. So the Indian picture should have come closer home for the planners, top planners of this country, to prepare for possible eventualities. We went into a budget system. At the time, India health infrastructure was on its knees. Demian, it's important to recall that all our critical cases, I think 80% of Uganda's critical health cases are managed in India. So India is like our referral hospital away from Morago. But we saw what happened there. So we had a budget which only integrated vaccines to the extent of 500 billion and ignored all other needs of essential treatment, testing, and care for the pandemic. We have countries, Kenya is experiencing the fourth wave, and South Africa. We have countries experiencing the fifth wave. We are on the second wave. But to know that we are shabby in our dealings, we shall not even plan beyond the second wave. And when the third wave happens, we shall be at the second level of shabbiness. And that is the state of governance in this country.
So you think we shall misappropriate the 1.3 trillion shillings that is coming our way?
You can maybe half of that
maybe
money
to get
funded, Damien.
Dr. Safari, I want to bring you in. On the politics, you see, the president just when he was launching the global health, I think that conference in Munyonyo, he was very, very bitter, and of course he came from the start. He was bitter on the issues of the vaccine and how the other countries are not being mean around it, and he said, of course, we are going to supply our own. Then he also agreed that our traditional ways can also be a place to run to. And here we are seeing COVID-19 and other samples coming in play. How are we handling now the politics of and the science of the vaccine in the country today?
Yes, thank you very much. First, I just want to say that it is not news for the president usually blaming, he usually has this blame game, especially when he notices maybe the things are running out of hand as earlier anticipated. I think around June last year, in one of his addresses, when I think it was the very first time I saw him giving credit to the health workers, at that very time, that's when we had one of the moving islands that blocked part of, I think, the River Nile, and we had a shortage in electricity for some time. I think he praised scientists, and you remember how he was telling the Minister of Finance and Minister of Health to increase salaries for the health workers, and that it's a year now and that has not passed. I think that was the time before the country had its national budget for the financial year 2020-2021, but still nothing yielded out of it. So it doesn't come as a surprise, because we know he will always throw such promises, and where things don't go well, he will always blame. At this point, the issue of the vaccine, other countries not willing to give Uganda the vaccine is because, like we said, this is war. Everybody needs fire maybe to light up and cook something. So no one is willing to surrender their fire to the neighbor, and they sleep on an empty stomach. Everybody has to now be in a survival mode. You have to first save yourself, then you look at how you can save your neighbor after. So in that regard, I think President, that is his usual blame game. He knows it clearly that the West has always supported, especially when he needs their support, be it in intelligence. We know what the Huawei was doing. BBC released a documentary showing how Uganda was spying on its citizens. We have seen very many aspects. In education, they are supporting us up to date. In HIV, really, they have supported us so well, and we are sure if it was not for the Western support, we would be grasping on HIV. The issue of COVID is just because it hit the entire globe, and therefore everybody has to first make sure they put their own people in a much safer place before they can deal with supporting others. About the issue, I think Sarah Bireete also raised the point of the 42,000 beds that the president maybe had projected and that was supposed to be purchased. And I personally wanted to ask, where were those beds going to be put in the first place? We do not have the capacity to have those beds in our health system as of now. High dependence beds or for ICU, we do not have where to put them. So first of all, in my own opinion, I would say that was a lie. Yes, Nambole is an open space, maybe is an open space with maybe a few, they can put tents and put beds. But you see, an HDU, an ICU is a place which is free of any bacteria, if I may use the simplest words, any microorganisms. Therefore, Nambole cannot be an HDU because there is free air, the free air that is moving within the environment. And in an ICU, this should not happen. You should be free of any microorganisms because the people who are there are in a state where they do not need to be co-infected by anything else. Therefore, Nambole would still not work. The issue of what he talked about during his launch for the Global Health Summit that happened recently, about the vaccine, Uganda developing its own vaccine, I think this is one thing that we cannot achieve. We shall keep talking about it and we shall never have one, given that partly scientists in the country are not empowered, but also given the resources like we already pointed out. That's why you see the issue of this new Covidex by Professor Ogwang. For some time, actually, for very many people, I think they have just come to know Professor Ogwang because of this Covidex. But I personally happen to be one of his students in medical school, and also a neighbor at home, maybe where we used to stay with Professor Ogwang, a very humble man. And I think for some time, he was driving a double cabin, which is a donation from the president as presidential support to scientists. So he has been one of the people who partly contributed in designing of the artemisinin-based therapy for management of malaria. He's one of these few pharmacologists who deal in extracting medicines from the natural resources that are available, the herbs and the shrubs that there be in our environment. I remember we used to call him a witch doctor simply because of that. But he's one sharp person, and I believe if more studies are conducted to see how effective his drug is, maybe it could be a breakthrough for Uganda. However, we cannot also rule out the point that maybe is not that very much known to the public about the big pharma wars. Maybe after here you read about the big pharma wars and you see why at times when somebody attempts to make a breakthrough on a certain maybe formula for a drug or anything, they're always fought in one way or the other. It is simply because it is being looked at as putting the other formulations or the other drugs that have already been developed off market. So therefore, in the end, it is always the person who has developed something new will always get that resistance. The only credit I can give to the president is giving Professor Ogwang a chance now to continue with his trials, and we see if this actually works. Otherwise, I think that is all that I can submit about the COVID-19, about his blame to the Western for not providing us with enough vaccines. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Safari. Rugyendo, are you clear with the network? Are you stable now? You need to work on your audio. Try to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry, I thought you had unmuted me. Sorry. Anyway, I am blaming Airtel. I am blaming Airtel because they are shrinking the civic space by allowing people who are interfering with my network. I hope Sarah, that statement really makes you feel happy. It's not Museveni. It's not only Museveni who is shrinking the space, the civic space. Also the telecom company.
Rugyendo.
Yes.
Who is the minister for business regulation and who is the minister responsible for implementation of effective ICT, especially as we go away from OTT and today we come up with some extraordinary exorbitant taxes on a system that means that we will not be able to do this kind of conversation at a critical time like this.
That's Dr. Wariomus, who I hope or I suspect might be the MP for Dr. Arnold. I don't know.
Oh, poor Chris. Okay.
But I want to dispel Dr. Arnold's fear.
Let me also get you there while you add on. Yeah. Do you think this we shall make some good headway with the vaccine?
You know, I have Pan-Africanist views when it comes to the president speaking about how we now have a chance to fend for ourselves. I wholeheartedly support him, and so when I hear my brother there, Dr. Safari, saying we will never have a vaccine, and being a scientist, I feel so worried because I expect that probably he would know. He would probably tell us why we are not going to have the vaccine. When I thought actually them as scientists are actually working very, very hard, because yesterday I established that I think for the past 2 or 3 years there has been money given to scientists, unless that money is going only to Makerere University, and that's about 30 billion shillings every year that goes through Resilient Africa to support scientific research at Makerere University. And some of these initiatives we are seeing coming up, like for example, Dr. What's his name? Dr. Cosmas Muichirize, who has come up with a decontaminator that people can use in their homes to decontaminate masks, and many other initiatives are coming out of this kind of funding. I think let's give government the benefit of doubt, because we don't have the vaccines, first of all, and secondly, the Western countries and their selfishness have been exposed, so therefore it means that we got to fend for ourselves. I've just had Rwanda, I think, joining efforts with some organizations in the European Union who are also trying to do something about vaccine manufacture. I think we must agree that there is effort going on, and I think no country really, or no president would wish to see their people dying. But the fears that Sarah was expressing, I think, are founded to some extent, because there has not been serious and coordinated organization around this second wave on the part of government, and this is what we observed last time: communication, all this. There's a lot of cynicism from the public, and this calls for the Ministry of Health and the people who are engaged in this effort to be as open and transparent as possible. Because when you issue a statement and say people should stop defaming Ministry of Health officials without directly answering some of the queries they are raising, it casts a lot of doubt about the effort and propels the shabbiness that Sarah was talking about. I want to see why I commend government efforts, because like I observed last week, countries that have fought this second wave successfully have been countries that have firmly implemented the SOPs, and that's what Uganda is doing. And I don't want us to say really the state is not doing anything. These lockdowns are important, and in terms of helping to scale down the spread of disease by breaking this close contact crowd and controlling crowds. It helps in some way. But when people have issues that they are raising, there should be a 24/7 sort of call center to answer their queries. If money has not been misappropriated, what's wrong with coming up openly and mentioning that this is how the money has been spent? And I see there's need to be some bit of effort there. Otherwise, this is an enemy that I think none of us really understands, and it should be the effort of everyone, not just government, not just the Ministry of Health officials, but all of us supporting our scientists, and also making sure that better funding goes into research and we get this vaccine as fast as possible. I've seen the president announce that he's very sure that by 2022, something big is going to be announced. Let's give him a benefit of doubt, because this is a war where everything that's being suggested, including herbal remedies and prayer as well, should be supported, should be encouraged. Because when we despair efforts by scientists, I think it doesn't give us the right energy to fight this disease. Because if you accept that prayers work, then also efforts that are going on by the scientists should be accepted as workable measures, not despairing them. If there are funding gaps, yes, let us raise them, and let's the ministry.
I think Dr. Safari's concerns around the mafiaism around the pharmaceuticals, but also the fact that the funding might not reach and not do the intended objective, like you're saying.
Oh, okay, I understand that.
Issues on funding.
Yes, and I understand that. I actually, right now, the meeting I was in was about these very, very things. Actually, I was called somewhere, and somebody was talking about how do we fight corruption in this country, and it's a long story, really. Corruption, I think, really comes back to individual Ugandans, in my view. You are charged with the responsibility to buy beds. Why don't you buy them? You are charged with the responsibility of vaccinating people, and you give them wrong vaccinations. This is a character issue. It's a moral issue on the part of individual Ugandans, and this I don't know how to fight it. I don't know what to say about this. But like I've said, yes, the efforts of those that are trying to do their best to fight this disease should be commended, and the enforcement around bad practice should also be commended. And I have seen some arrests, and these arrests really should go on. We shouldn't see just sporadic reactions just because people have complained. If money has been is going to be allocated, we need an open process, a transparent process involving the different agencies, the IGG, Parliament, and the monitoring unit, to ensure that actually this money that has been committed to this fight goes the right activities and addresses those activities. The big pharma wars, these are big capital wars that are very, very difficult to fight. I have heard Dr. Gwang has been given maximum security, and I hope really that saves the situation. And these are geopolitical fights that they are even beyond our country. And once an effort like this is in place, I expect Ugandans not to stampede it, but to give everything and support the efforts, support all the scientists, give them the right funding and support that I see, especially being given to Dr. Gwang, to ensure that COVID-19 works. Some people have tested it. I'm told it has worked. I have not used it myself because I'm not sick. I am hoping if the third wave that I hear is on its way coming here, by the time it comes, we need to see probably COVIDX, and if it works, that is, reach every other person, in a subsidized way. And this is not what we are seeing. The state probably could subsidize it, but even the poor people are able to access it cheaply, and that way we shall know that the state cares, that government cares for us.
Thank you very much, Rugyendo. Sarah, I know you'd want to have a word or two around there, but while you share those thoughts, of course, you hinted on the fact that you're not sure our loan will reach will cover or do what it's supposed to do. But then you also need to help us unpack the issue of accountability issues emerging from management of the first wave, that we saw, and also how can we ensure that public finance management is followed with, of course, the increasing public debt crisis that we are into.
Well, on a brief take on vaccines, really. The countries manufacturing vaccines are mainly UK, there's Russia, there's now Cuba, there's the US, and then India, the Serum Institute that partnered with Oxford University, and a few others that have managed to. I think we have about 11 vaccines, 2 of them pending approval by World Health Organization. I think it's important to underscore the fact that these countries that escalated efforts, and China, which has 2 vaccines, were the most, that escalated efforts for the manufacture of vaccines were the most affected by COVID under the first, second, and third wave. The US is struggling to reach. I think it has just hit about to 60% or above of immunization of its population. It hasn't gone beyond 60%. Europe has immunized a big number, including UK. I think they are about 80%, and that's why we see stadiums full, watching the Euro and no masks. They have regained their lives. So I think it was more critical, and it was not in bad faith for these countries to want to first give priority for their citizens. If, Demian, there is hunger in your area, you do not take a plate from your child, who is also malnourished, to go feed the neighbor. At most, you divide the food. But you cannot deny your own suffering child to go and take care of another person's child. I do not think anybody is capable of that. You have to leave something for your own. You have to watch out for your own before you can go out to rescue the neighbor. So I think it does not make a lot of sense to sit here and condemn the West that worked tirelessly, funded research, funded innovation and technology to make sure they control the pandemic, save lives, livelihood, and economies of their countries. My blame goes to the other leaders. What did they do about it? If you know you don't have capacity to fund research and make a vaccine, what area are you concentrating on? Can you concentrate on sensitization? We know how we won the HIV battle. Uganda was one of the leaders, including HIV and Ebola pandemics. We did not fund research. We did not fund medicine and vaccines, but we funded sensitization, proper sensitization, and we never politicized those pandemics. So these countries should have concentrated on areas where they had strength as far as controlling the spread of the pandemic was concerned. The developed countries had capacity to produce herd immunity by immunizing between 60 to 70% of their countries, and they fast tracked that. So on our part, what did we fast track? If I wanted to be cynical, I can say we fast tracked corruption. We fast tracked both political and financial corruption by using COVID frustrate political freedoms under the first wave by using COVID money to fund campaigns and other useless things other than investing in the health of the people. We should have struck sensitization and communication for behavior change, knowing that we are weak on science, research, innovation, and technology for vaccines, and save the population using behavior change analysis and practices as we wait for vaccines to be available for everybody. But we concentrated on neither, and to me that is my problem. And when a leader comes up to bash other people, you are bashing India, which is just reversing the curve. I don't know what the deaths in India today is. They are just reversing the curve from 5,000 deaths per day. Our total deaths today are just above 1,000. India has been witnessing 5,000 deaths per day. Are you really exercising the humanity that you are parading under the vulgarized Pan-Africanism? Is that humanity? A nation is losing thousands of people per day, and you are crucifying them for saying, let's first reduce the deaths here. For you, what have you been doing in your country? I don't call that leadership. But on the issue of in finance management, I think our corruption records are among the worst. It is not clear that the best that our leadership can do is to engage in a corruption walk on the streets. There has never been any serious fight against corruption. We establish institutions and undermine them. We have an Auditor General who tries to do commendable independent work, but his reports are never debated or implemented. Even when Parliament goes out of the way to investigate, we have seen the reports of COSASE and the Bank of Uganda corruption, under the handshake of URA, and the president came forward and defended the handshake and some of these scandals. We have seen the crisis in oil. Even before we get oil out of the soil, people have been using oil money, including the Taro oil cases that went into international courts through kickbacks that even include the name of the president, not to mention the scandal by Honorable Kutesa as UN chief diplomat. So that is our record of public finance and prudence in financial accountability. But going by the recent audit report, the Auditor General raises a lot of critical issues that should be answered. But how is the government responding? They are now threatening people from attacking frontline workers. Yes, you are a frontline worker as a permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health, who is a medical doctor. But you are an accounting office of that institution, and you must account for public funds that you administer contrary to the laws of the land. Every law and principle has exceptions. I have seen Dr. Diana Twine saying the procurement laws are not favorable to fight a pandemic. If this pandemic had been managed under Article 110 of the Constitution, we would have provided for emergency procurement for necessary situations like oxygen and PPEs. But because the political leadership does not want larger stakeholder involvement and greater scrutiny of their actions, they are managing the pandemic under Draconian Public Health Act that is not in conformity with the Constitution. And that is part of the problem.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That is intriguing. I want to invite. I will accountability issues. you seem like you're agreeing so much with Sarah.
Who?
I was saying that
who are you talking about?
Rugyendo, would you want to come in?
No, you're asking me?
Okay, since you're from a meeting that was handling corruption related issues, can you kindly come and try to interject a little on what Sarah is saying? Yes.
Sarah is a pessimist. That's the biggest problem. Sarah is a pessimist, but sometimes has very good insights into how best we can do it. I think for me that's what I pick from Sarah. And but what is at hand right now? I think for me that's the most critical issue here. What is at hand is that we have a wave. We have a wave that needs every effort. For me, that is, I think, critical. And so, is the ministry or is the government doing what it can? Is it following the SOPs? Is it implementing the SOPs as we would want to see? What is the police doing? What's the law enforcement doing? And how do we mitigating the other issues, the attendant issues that come with that? For example, welfare. How are people surviving this lockdown, and other welfare issues? She's talking about that procurement should have been done under some emergency law or act or something like that. But it appears that's what actually happened last time. That's what happened, especially under the OPM. I was seeing a list of going around social media, indicating how people were able to supply foodstuffs and other equipment. Different companies, Ugandan companies actually made supplies to the ministry, to the OPM, and all this was under the emergency procurement arrangement that Sari is talking about. Is it happening now? I have no idea, and that worries me too, because if that is not happening, then we should be having enough capacity going around, and this is not what we are seeing. I think by and large we could give it a few more days and encourage people to vaccinate, which I think is happening. And I don't have the numbers, but the more people vaccinate, first of all, the target is 5 million. I think we haven't even hit 1 million for some reason that has to do with skepticism around these vaccines. But ultimately, the fight against this disease is a matter of everyone. It's not just about enforcement. It's about whether we want to survive or not. The economics that comes with it is another matter, but survival first. Let us go and vaccinate. In my view, if you don't, it will also become very difficult to enforce or to stop the untold number of deaths that we see. And this has happened even in more sophisticated countries like India. How do we ensure that in Uganda this doesn't happen? Everyone must vaccinate, and we must get the right vaccines in place. Not what I saw the other day, and I think I commend the law enforcement that has been able to bust this person. Why he has not been arrested is I think something for Sarah to elucidate, because I don't know why. Because somebody, I actually find it shocking that Dr. Mugume, whoever it is, cannot be nabbed when his phones are on and you have the most sophisticated monitoring system by UCC, and you say you cannot locate, triangulate somebody and pick him where he's seated. This is very, very strange to me, and it goes to show why Ugandans really are not supportive of these efforts generally, and because we need to see if. Yes, we're not going to stop crooks. Crooks will always take advantage of any situation. It has happened. We've seen how some hospitals have taken advantage of this and hiked their bills. This is going to happen. Any situation, you always have the bad people who want to take advantage of it. But law enforcement should be equipped very, very well to arrest the situation and take charge. Why after 3-4 days this person cannot be picked? I think it is strange. Is there something that we don't understand?
You agree with Sarah?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, you can now agree.
Because yes, we cannot. I think enforcement really needs to be upped. They need to up the game really in some of the things.
Hmm.
On that note, I would want to bring in Dr. Safari. Do we have a plan for inclusive stakeholder involvement in the management of the pandemic? At least have you had something like this coming up from your task force, or any information that has been sent to the task force?
Yes, as Rukungiri, I think we are really doing that already. We have tried to put everybody on board. Security, we have there. Basically, maybe if I'm to take you through the components of a task force, which people comprise the task force for Rukungiri as a district, definitely it is led by the RDC, who is the presidential representative. On the same task force is the DHO. Then there is a chief administrative officer for the district. We have some community development officers, probation, and we have somebody in charge of psychosocial support. So I think as a district, and I anticipate it could be the same elsewhere, and this is purposely to cater for each and everyone during this pandemic. We cannot entirely make it a medical issue, like whereas it is still a big point everywhere, including even in the Uganda Medical Association. People still believe that this pandemic should have been best handled by the doctors. I think the presidential initiative and strategy to have everyone on board, including the RDCs, the police, the DPCs, the CRAO, because as a district, for as a country, you can, if these people are not actually involved. Therefore, I think there is some aspect of inclusion. We cannot entirely deal with it as health workers. It has to involve all the stakeholders, the police, because health workers may not enforce the curfew and all the other regulations. The cow, in the case of any forms of procurement, the cow and maybe those other officers can be in charge. For the psychosocial support and aspects that we intend to bring on board, we already have community development officers, we have probation officer, and and also a focal person in charge of psychosocial support, so that at least we can have all aspects, not only focusing on case management, treating patients, and we just throw them back into the communities and they are rejected, because we have seen cases where people actually are declared free of the disease, but people cannot easily take them up. Or we have seen people who have been depressed, some have developed psychiatric illnesses. They cannot believe that people they have been with no disease have actually died of the disease in a very short time. So I think there is some aspect of inclusion, because various stakeholders have been brought on board to ensure that we cater for an individual as a whole, not just treatment and then discharging home, or not just procurement and then maybe there is no form of administration from the RDCs and maybe the cow in general. Your microphone is muted, I think. We cannot hear you.
Demian,
your microphone
in some
is
places,
muted.
especially. Yes, I'm here. What I was saying that this multi-stakeholder involvement, if we have all the stakeholders involved, where there's a communication, there's the aspect of communication gaps. Currently, an LC letter, I see it doesn't work. Yet, of course, the government, the presidential directive was that the LOC can also give you authority, because the LOCs know you better and know the kind of condition you're into. But we are seeing this is not happening. Most roadblocks, if you have an LC letter, you're not allowed to go past.
I think this entirely is because, like we pointed out earlier, in Uganda, really it is hard to trust an individual. You know, it is easy to forge a chairman LC1 stamp. Oh, you can actually a chairman LC1 a chairman LC1 is just a relative, or a chairman LC1 is the father. So anytime they can easily authorize traveling or movement without the really necessary reasons for movement. So I think in some way police has noticed that if we let this be entirely run by chairmen, at the end of the day we shall find that actually there is no lockdown, because people will be moving at leisure, going to a chairman who is your neighbor and he signs for you, and you go to town purposely, maybe for shopping, not even necessarily seeking health care, is very easy. So to some extent, I think this police knows, whereas the president issued this, he's not on the ground to know exactly what happens on the ground. So in some instances, they tend to go against it, which I think to some extent it is okay, because when you move to Rukungiri town right now, you may not even think there is a lockdown. People walk, but they will reach town, and the town is full of people, and at the end of the day, the disease transmission goes on and on. Actually, as Rukungiri, we are thinking we should impose our own lockdown and close almost everywhere, apart from maybe a few the supermarkets. But we are thinking electronic shops do not really need to operate in these times, because the only thing that happens there is crowding, and I think it is not so urgent that if you do not buy maybe headsets like I'm putting on, or if you do not buy another phone, I think it is not that an emergency. So I think the issue of LOCs issuing letters to some extent will not help in cutting down on the unnecessary movements by the population. So that's why you see police once in a while trying to stop them. Actually, even us as a district, when I go to the DHO for a letter, he clearly indicates that I will be moving within the district. So if I was caught on the borders of Ntungamo, then police would definitely say, your permission says you are not supposed to move out of Rukungiri. Where are you going?
Yeah, true. Let me bring in Ochieno. Just a few. Are you an LC of your area? Nagongera, you speak for it so much. So I want you to ask, where is the empowerment? If we can't give the opportunity for, say, the LOCs to do their mandate, where can we see all stakeholders brought on board and ensure that the SOPs are followed? If there are loopholes, say, like the doctor is saying that possibly the LOC might be your relative and they will allow you go. If the stakeholders are disconnected, shall we see a total enforcement of these SOPs?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that LCs started from so-called resistance councils, which is a very NRA push thing. And I think it's time we reviewed it in context. But the principle is really the pluralist, open grassroots democracy, which was something before NRA, which UPC was trying to implement. In fact, if well managed, grassroots democracy in terms of managing and dealing with crises like this would actually work very, very well. In fact, if this country were democratic, if this country did not have the corruption that it does have from the top, and if this country had the genuine national leadership that was serious, in fact, the management of this pandemic would be generally not only easy, but much better. In fact, I had actually argued last year too, that with the political structures that we have, possibly lockdowns could have been done in such a manner that the more rural a community were, the less stringent the restrictions were. Because in many cases, people in communities at the equivalent of LC levels, people knew who's who and who's new coming in here and who's sick, just rightly as Arnold suggests. And yet that said, I would have been actually critical, but Arnold has sort of just slightly persuaded me, about the integrated system, which excludes LC as exclusive lead person on this, but rather a system that involves healthcare workers, the police community development officers. So meaning therefore that some of these things whether it is at a parish level or possibly slightly lower, integrated. And if you took it, upscaled it to the district level, it should generally be able to work, as joined up working. Now, I think the concern, though, is that not many people at rural levels would be able to have the capacity and opportunities that Arnold suggests when an emergency arises. At this time, while the second wave is hitting, and while I'm very concerned, it is the case that possibly it is not yet at a crisis level where you would say that every other parish is sort of overwhelmed. And just like Sarah was invoking God, we just hope and pray that this thing does not escalate beyond sort of where it is, or the trajectory is one which does not go beyond what statisticians might want to compute. Because if that actually happens, I don't think this country, or any most other African countries with the loose infrastructures, would necessarily be able to manage this very, very well. And yet, that said, I want to take us back slightly to the leadership question that I mentioned, and to Rugyendo and corruption. Rugyendo, unfortunately, I want to disappoint you that I don't know where you went, and I know you're a very well-intentioned guy, but unless and until Museveni, under this regime, Museveni wakes up one morning and says enough and enough with corruption in this country and leads against corruption, I don't see it changing. It is Museveni who has the audacity, to sell corruption to the extent that he's able to recycle a minister like Jim Muhwezi, who was indicted, and you know what I'm saying. When we have young, fantastic doctors like the Arnolds here, when we have over 1,000 doctors who are actually jobless in this country, the point really is this: corruption has been officially nationalized and centered really at the top of our country. And it's a cancer which is really, really generally eating our country. Now, why I'm putting it on not as a political statement, but saying that at this critical time for COVID, where all of us are pleading with one another to come together, appealing with one another to come together, it's a shame that artificial COVID vaccines should emerge somewhere. Now, the emergence of those COVID so-called vaccines should not be, we should not clap for security services who apprehend these people alone. We should question how and the root causes and how this kind of situation would emerge. It shows you that the state has been privatized and that health services have been privatized to the extent that you give room and opportunity for opportunists to play national road with the public health. So very, very unfortunate indeed. But yes, I agree. These are things for which we all need to rally around. But just a quick one, Rugyendo. While you were away, while you were trying to get ready to get hold on to my good brother, Chris Baramosi, to help you with your computer items, there was a suggestion about specialist centers. That is depending on, how the second wave develops within the next day or so, particularly within the next week, that if we do not seem to see a drop, the suggestion by Arnold that possibly every district should identify a specialist center, I think is something which is a very good idea. And I had asked that Sarah and I, and so therefore you too, using your powerful spaces where you're going to discuss corruption in the Western afternoon, delaying us on this program for nothing. Of course, I'm joking with that. We could go ahead and pick these things and compel government to actively consider this as an option for helping deal with this situation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Joseph. Yes. Sarah, I want you to bring in quickly, as our time is fast spent. What should we do differently to save livelihoods, and also prevent the third, fourth, and possibly the fifth wave, as we are seeing in other countries?
Well, Demian, IMF has compiled COVID policy responses by all countries in the world. When you look at countries that have reestablished normal lives, or gone back to their normal lives, to the extent of holding a G7 meeting with no masks, where the most advanced leader of the world, the Queen of England, attended and was closely hugging people and dining with her fellow leaders with no masks, and no leader got infected. I think we all know what it takes to restore normal life of citizens, reverse the spread of the pandemic, break the chain by building herd immunity, of immunizing up to 70% of the population, to make sure that there are no risks of any infected person reinfecting another. So the first target is immunizing 70% of the population. But as we work on immunization, you need to be able to make sure that the citizens keep alive until you are able to immunize that percentage, because you do not have the immunization, the vaccine is in store. So we need to first make sure we have enough capacity to test and treat the virus, the infections that are within the communities. That means we must focus on procuring essential drugs, saving the lives of our frontliners. I think we have lost up to 43 health workers in this second wave, which is very unfortunate. These are rare creative talents that are highly educated, and it takes us to educate such as specialists that we are losing at the recklessness of the people leading the health sector. People don't have PPEs to be able to protect themselves. Doctors are exposed, nurses are exposed to the virus, yet they are committed to their oath and passion of saving lives. This is scandalous. So we must make sure we have essential drugs, essential protective gear to test, treat, and control the pandemic and save lives at that level. Beyond that, we go into immunization to build herd immunity to protect our lives as well as livelihoods as a country. Beyond that, we should be able now to look at how to salvage the economy, because poverty is also a killer. Save lives, save livelihoods, save the national economy, you know, the sectors that build into the core of the national economy, so that tomorrow you will have a country to build on. And this is where I see that our government is really shabby and not planning well. If we are losing our frontiers, we have few doctors that are working. Arnold told us we have a lot of doctors that are not motivated to practice medicine here because of the conditions. So we have a few doctors in the labor force. Save them. Revamp the health sector. Subsidize private sector, providing them with essential drugs and PPEs for COVID, so that you bring down the costs in the private hospitals that subscribe the work of government in treating people. Then address the question of reliefs. We know that 53 billion was gazetted for vulnerable people. But how many, today if you asked people that are inboxing other people for looking for dinner because it's coming to 4, families that have not had lunch and are looking for money, maybe to be able to buy a chapati and dry tea for their children today, I am sure we have 60% of family heads looking for money to to give dinner to their children. So when you go and categorize relief fund, and then you dramatize it as if any household of 5 people can live on 100,000 for 42 days. And then you also fail to disburse that money because we are now in the 3rd week of lockdown and you are still registering who is a vulnerable person. When a country is full, you know, you are running a border economy. Borders earn on a daily basis. You are running a capital state of vendors selling sweet bananas on the roads. These people earn daily income, and it's what they live on. And you spend 3 weeks saying you are tracing a vulnerable person. What kind of incompetence is that? I wish to really Rest my case.
Rugyendo, don't shake your head, because then I'm bringing you in, and our time is fast spent, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes. First is to possibly pick out what Sarah said, because you said that she always has important information, and you need to package that information and share with us your key messages and recommendations to government and possibly to the fellow citizens.
I like how Sarah dramatized the whole thing and said, and outrageously said, government has taken 3 weeks implementing one simple thing, sending mobile money to people. And I think it's not 3 weeks. I think it's just a few days. But I am one of the people who supported that method, because we are always asking, how do we ensure that, even food, physical food, is not stolen? Send money to my phone. You eliminate the human contact. It's only the machines, to the phone and Airtel, or my phone and MTN, and that's it. And so, and for me, I was really supportive of the new Prime Minister, when she was saying, the process is being criticized because it has eliminated middlemen. And I think we all want to see corruption fought that way, whereby we use means that cannot involve human beings who suspiciously are inherently corrupt, and will not make sure that the people get the right disbursements. I think, for me, it's a very good measure, and it needs to be done yesterday. They need to send this money because people are suffering. I know, and like I mentioned even last time, the issue is that majority of our population are self-sustaining and have no salary, have not been trading, and therefore they need to eat something. And the faster the state does this, the better. It doesn't. I think, for me, I don't like the fact that they have to wait and first of all have everyone. If they are verified, if people send the money, because hunger does not wait for that moment when the whole country has been mapped. No, if you are verified that Rugyendo's phone is okay and he's the right person and he's and is vulnerable, send the money, because the machine will keep the data and will make sure you not send that money to the same person again. So I don't know why. Maybe I think the state, some of these people, are still living in the Stone Age. They're using Stone Age methods to run a digital operation. Because if my phone has been verified, I don't need to wait for everyone to be verified first to be able to eat. I will have collapsed or have died. I will maybe force my way out of my home to go and find some food, and then I will now clash with the law enforcement agencies. I think, really, digital is digital. It is supersonic. It is instant. It is immediate. Just do the thing. You don't have to wait. So now, what we need to do now, I think, for me, I think the state, the government actors should learn from the mistakes that have happened in this second wave, that caught them unawares, and plan for a third wave. Because I know, I was reading, I think 2 days ago, an official at the ministry, at the World Health Organization, was warning of a third wave in Africa, actually, just the other two days ago. And so we had said that we needed 42 beds, 42,000 beds. Maybe Dr. Arnold should tell us, what is so special about these beds? Are these the kind of beds that cannot be fabricated by our own people in Katwe? What is so special about them that you can't have them in those numbers and instantly? If they are fabricatable, and if I was NRM, honestly speaking, I would use this opportunity to even drive a political incentive out of this. What do I need to do? I will go and get Noise, Sarah, and Kantakaras, Joseph Ochieno, and say, please supply me fabricated 100 beds. Can you do it? Yes. I will go to Mr. Update and his people in Kawempe and say, please give me 1,000 beds. can you fabricate them? Because I was seeing the other day, this Mr. Update man was supplying some beds, was donating some beds which were fabricated by some of his people in Kawempe. I would go to Katwe and say, Katwe, since you've been there for the long haul and you've proven that you can fabricate very good stuff, I'm giving you 8,000 beds. But I think suspiciously, somebody probably is trying to procure them from out of the country. And this is ridiculous, in my view. These beds, doctor, you need to tell me here before I even finish this point, because are they so special that Uganda can't make them? That our people in Katwe cannot fabricate them? What is so difficult about? What is so mysterious about?
I think Doctor will come in his final remarks because our time is.
Doctor, I want you to answer me this question. I may be wrong, but if I am right, give some money.
Yes.
Let government give money to these young people who are hungry, but have the means to fabricate them. The president actually has supported some of them with machines. They are all over in Chireka, in Bugeyo Gerere. I have seen them along Entebbe Road. They are all over the place. In Katwe, they are all over the place. At Kubiri here, where I am speaking from, going to Kawempe, there are so many boys fabricating these things. In Bugeyo Gerere, where I stay, just across my gate, there is a number of people who are fabricating. Why don't we give them a chance and then make sure that we organize them and they will produce these beds and cheaply to the state, and we make sure we prepare for any eventuality. If that does not happen and we defeat COVID, send these beds to health center 2s, to health center 3s. They don't have them. What is so mysterious about them? So I want that. This is the only message I really want to send to the Minister of Health, and some of them are my friends. Please call these young people. Call up, make a call, a public call for people to supply beds. Ugandans are very good. They will fabricate them and they will supply them, and we'll have 42,000 and even more, and put them all over the place and prepare for an eventuality which people are suspecting might be a third wave.
Thank you very much.
Second and lastly, I think we talked about improving communication around COVID. Yeah, if we're not going to stop people who are cynical, and we're not going to stop people from defaming our hard-working Minister of Health officials. Please answer their questions. It's as simple as that. If the money was not eaten, provide evidence that this is how money was spent. Throw it on the same space where they are using you from, and that's social media. We are in the media. We can run these stories. If you keep quiet and just simply send out a statement that people just stop abusing us. We are, you are in a public space. You're not going to stop people from defaming you. Just provide the facts. That's all, and we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rugyendo. Yes, thank you, Dr. Safari. In 30 seconds, let's use 30 seconds. Your key messages and recommendations to government and the fellow citizens.
Yeah, thank you very much. My only recommendation, I think, will go in line with what Otim has already talked about, the issue of beds. These beds entirely can be made locally, because unless they are purposely for ICU, which I have already clearly pointed out that we do not have the ICU where we can accommodate these beds. So basically, we would rather use these beds to manage the mild cases before they progress into severe cases that actually need ICU. Those beds can be locally manufactured here, but many people here in Uganda benefit from the procurement processes that they go through, and that's where a lot of money is swindled. My submission, I would rather recommend that as government, instead of having regional referral hospitals as the only treatment centers for COVID-19, I think which partly could have even contributed to the mortalities that we have, because people have to be referred, and now you're referring somebody, you do not have oxygen. We would rather instead equip at least a health facility per district, be it a health center for districts that do not have a hospital, or a hospital or two for districts that actually have. In Rukungiri, we have 2 hospitals, and unfortunately they are not government aided. Both are private, not for profit. That is Nachival Hospital and Chisi's Hospital. These 2 have the capacity to manage COVID-19 cases that are mild, moderate, but which have not yet progressed to severe forms. And if we were mandated or had the capacity to do that, I really think we would have dealt with the pandemic as fast as possible. Many people actually coming in late because they try home-based care, one, without even coming to health facilities to be diagnosed. All those that are diagnosed, the system has not been well designed that they are followed up, so we do not get enough feedback unless it is the health worker who takes it upon themselves to know how the patients that they have sent back home into home-based care, how they are faring. It becomes hard to know whether really the treatment that you have given to this person and led home, whether they actually are adhering to it or whether it is actually working for them. So a central or treatment area per district would rather work instead of concentrating on regional referrals and also advising on home-based management for the mild cases, because what you may look at as mild in a few hours might be actually a severe form of the disease. We have seen people who come in and they are very stable, and you really think you should let them go only to measure the oxygen and they are saturating at 80% or even less. So I think that is what I would recommend is for the government to take on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Safari. Joseph, your final 30 seconds.
I think mine really is, because time is very bad, to just re-endorse the suggestion by Dr. Arnold that urgent review be done on specialist centers, and that is something that can be done. But my question is whether or not there is the capacity to be able to do this. Rugyendo seems to sing about it, but Rugyendo, this is basically just an incompetent accidental regime that however long it takes in power, they don't seem to be able to learn. But at this stage, we are just hoping and praying that some people in this regime and some of the public servants who are relatively political join hands with everyone else to try and push for a direction where it is possible for all of us to be able to check the spread and contain the death and contain this disease.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joseph. Sarah?
Well, I think since the issues of government have been addressed, let me address my fellow Muntu Awansi. As you have heard through the discussion, really citizens are on their own. If you have a patient, I've just seen a civil suit, somebody suing a hospital for detention of a dead body, which now they claim has disappeared for 31 million. Citizens are on their own, even in documentaries that we have seen about Murago. Even people are given prescription to buy medicine in Murago, and oxygen is coming in drops. So since we are on our own, let's make sure we break the chain of infections. Observe the soaps, social distance, avoid crowds, stay home if you can, wash hands, protect yourself, protect your loved ones, protect your neighbor. I think if we build that, that protection around ourselves, we can break the chain of infection and get back to our normal lives where we are able to fend for ourselves and our loved ones. Because I know how difficult it is. Even for the salary employees, most salaries are cut by half during lockdowns. So you find that everybody is struggling, yet the cost of living is high. The prices are likely to shoot up. We have entered the new financial year with the new taxes. A range of new 12 taxes have been slapped on us. Those of you educating your children at home, you have to find money for 12% internet tax to be able to access lessons on top of looking for food. So we are on our own. Let's work hard so that we get out of this situation on our own and survive. Because I'm sure the political leadership, they will do the little they can. They will squander the opportunities as usual. But we need to move on as a human race. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I will not give Rugyendo an opportunity to react to that pessimism if that's the way he wants to put it. But that's a general call to all the citizens out there. Kindly observe the SOPs, and we know at one point we shall go out of this. We shall win this war. Thank you very much, my panelists.
I am the chief spreader of optimism in Uganda.
Thank you very much, my panelists.
Sarah should be.
My guests, Safari, Rugyendo, Sarah.
Please have faith.
For being
Sarah
with
should
us.
have faith.
Yeah, thank you very much for this day, and kindly subscribe to this conversation on Civic Space TV, YouTube. Kindly go there, subscribe on YouTube. On Facebook, we are on live. Twitter, ChatshowUg, we are on live. Share your comments, share your posts and your reactions. We keep getting this feedback and they help us improve. Kindly observe the SOPs. We meet next weekend. Good evening.